Hi everyone, glad you're here, Pa. Today we're exploring hospital regulations that seem outdated, unnecessary, or just plain absurd.
Hospitals save lives, but their rules sometimes feel like they were written by sleep-deprived robots with a personal vendetta against logic. Fact 1. You'd think a hospital, the place designed to heal you, would be flexible about, well, being sick. But no. Some hospitals enforce a strict visiting hours only rule so rigid, it treats family members like nightclub guests trying to sneak past a bouncer. Imagine this. Your loved one just had surgery. You rush in worried, emotional, ready to support. And suddenly a clipboard-wielding staff member informs you it's 7:01 p.m. and visiting hours ended at 7. Not 7-ish. Not close enough. Exactly 7. Doesn't matter if you drove 3 hours or if grandma just woke up asking for you like it's the final scene of a movie. Come back tomorrow. It's less healthcare system and more exclusive VIP lounge, except instead of cocktails, you get emotional trauma and a pamphlet. Fact 2. Hospitals love rules about food, not nutrition, control. Some places won't let patients eat outside food, even if the hospital menu tastes like it was designed during a flavor shortage. You bring your friend a burger, just a normal, comforting burger, and suddenly you're treated like you smuggled contraband into a maximum security prison. Sorry, outside food is not allowed. Why? Infection risk? Allergies? Nope. Policy. Meanwhile, the patient is staring at a gray piece of chicken that looks like it lost the will to exist sometime during transport. The irony is incredible. Your body is fighting for survival, your taste buds are begging for mercy, and the system says, best we can do is boiled sadness. It's the only place where healing comes with a side of culinary punishment. Fact 3. Let's talk about the legendary no phone use rule in certain hospital areas. Now, sure, decades ago, maybe your flip phone could somehow interfere with life-saving machines. But today, you could leave stream from space, and somehow your phone is still the villain. Patients sit there, bored out of their minds, staring at beige walls like it's a minimalist art exhibit, while their phone, the one thing keeping them sane, is banned like it's a dangerous weapon. Need to text your family? Nope. Want to scroll anything to distract yourself from existential dread? Absolutely not. Meanwhile, every doctor walks around with 3 devices clipped to their body like they're auditioning for a tech convention. The message is clear. Technology is dangerous, unless you're wearing a badge. Fact 4, and then there's the masterpiece of confusion, the fasting before procedures rule. Sounds reasonable, right? Until it turns into a guessing game designed by chaos. Don't eat after midnight, they say. Simple. Except your procedure gets delayed, and delayed, and delayed again. Suddenly it's 4 p.m., you haven't eaten in 16 hours, and you're questioning every life choice that led you here. You ask if you can have a sip of water, just a sip, and they look at you like you just requested a 5-course meal. Meanwhile, your body is running on fumes, your brain is buffering, and the only thing being tested is your patience. At this point, you're not even worried about the procedure. You're just trying to survive the hospital's unofficial Hunger Games. Fact 5. Hospitals have a fascinating obsession with wristbands, and not in a fun, music festival kind of way. The moment you walk in, they slap one on your wrist like you've just checked into a very exclusive resort where the only activity is waiting. But here's the twist. You're not allowed to remove it. Ever. Not if it's too tight. Not if it's itching like you rolled your arm through fiberglass. Not even if it starts disintegrating like a cheap receipt. Patients have been told to shower with it, sleep with it, and basically treat it like a lifelong commitment. Lose it, and suddenly your identity becomes a mystery worthy of a detective show. Are you really John Smith or just a very committed method actor? It's the only place where a flimsy plastic band holds more authority than your actual face. Fact 6. There's a rule in some hospitals that limits how many people can be in a patient's room at once. And on paper, it makes sense. In reality, it turns into a bizarre game of human musical chairs. You've got 3 allowed visitors, but 5 family members show up. So now everyone's rotating in and out like it's a shift-based job. One person leaves, another sneaks in, someone pretends to be just stepping out for a second, and suddenly the hallway looks like a family reunion sponsored by confusion. Meanwhile, the patient is lying there trying to rest while a full logistical operation unfolds around them. It's less about healing and more about managing a guest list like you're hosting the world's saddest party. And the nurse? The bouncer, keeping the crowd under control. Fact 7. Hospitals also have an almost philosophical relationship with paperwork. You can walk in barely conscious, clutching your side like you're in the final act of a drama, and before anything happens, someone hands you a clipboard. Just fill this out. Oh, of course. Let me just recall my full medical history, insurance details, emergency contacts, and possibly my childhood fears while I'm actively questioning my survival. And heaven help you if you miss a box. Suddenly, the system grinds to a halt because you didn't specify whether you're allergic to something you've never heard of. It's like trying to board a flight while your leg is on fire. The urgency of your condition takes a back seat to whether you remembered your zip code. Fact 8. And finally, we arrive at the rule that truly tests your sanity, the wait your turn policy in emergency rooms. Now, logically, emergencies should be urgent. But instead, you're placed into a mysterious queue that operates on rules no human fully understands. You walk in thinking you'll be seen quickly, only to realize you've entered a time loop where minutes stretch into hours. Meanwhile, someone who arrived after you somehow gets called first, and you're left wondering if they unlocked a secret level or brought a VIP pass. The screen displays your name like it's teasing you. You're next. For 3 straight hours. At some point, you're not even mad anymore. You're impressed. Because nothing says emergency quite like a waiting room that feels like a slow-motion experiment in patience. Fact 9. Hospitals have a rule about discharge times that feels less like medicine and more like a hotel checkout policy designed by someone who hates comfort. You're finally told you can go home. Freedom, fresh air, real food, and then comes the catch. You have to leave by a very specific time, not whenever you're ready, not take your time. No, it's a race. Suddenly nurses are moving faster, paperwork appears out of nowhere, and you're expected to gather your belongings like you're escaping a building before it locks itself. Still dizzy? Doesn't matter. Waiting for a ride? Better hurry. It's the only place where recovery ends with a soft deadline, like your healing process is on a schedule. Congratulations, you survived. Now please exit the premises immediately. Fact 10. There's also the strangely strict rule about when you're allowed to sleep, which is ironic, considering rest is literally part of healing. Hospitals operate on a schedule that seems designed by someone who's never actually tried to sleep in one. Just as you drift off, here comes a nurse checking your vitals. Finally fall back asleep? Time for medication. Close your eyes again. Someone turns on the lights to ask how you're feeling. By morning, you've technically spent 8 hours in bed, but experienced it like a series of interrupted dreams. It's less rest and recover and more participate in a sleep deprivation experiment. At some point, you start wondering if the real test isn't your illness, but your ability to function without ever reaching REM sleep. Fact 11. Hospitals also enforce a surprisingly strict wear the gown properly rule, which would be fine if the gown itself wasn't a betrayal of basic engineering. You're handed this thin piece of fabric that barely qualifies as clothing and told to tie it in the back. The back, the one place you can't see, reach properly, or defend. No matter how carefully you secure it, there's always a lingering sense that you're one wrong step away from starring in an accidental public performance. Walking down the hallway feels like a high-stakes balancing act between dignity and disaster, and somehow, everyone pretends this is normal. It's the only uniform where exposure is not a bug, it's a feature. Fact 12. Then there's the rule about calling for assistance. Press the button if you need anything. Sounds comforting, right? Until you realize that pressing the button feels like summoning a mythical creature that may or may not appear. You press it once, politely. Wait. Nothing. Press it again. Slightly more desperate. Still nothing. Eventually, you're staring at the button like it personally betrayed you. When someone finally arrives, it's either instantly or after a timeline that makes you question reality. The unpredictability turns a simple request, like needing water, into a psychological gamble. Do you press it again and risk being that patient? Or do you sit there, thirsty, proving you can survive in the wild with nothing but determination. Fact 13. And finally, the rule that might be the most confusing of all. Don't Google your symptoms. Doctors say it with a calm smile, like they're gently asking you not to peek behind the curtain. But you're lying there with nothing but time, a phone, if you're allowed one, and a brain that refuses to stay calm. Of course you're going to Google it. And what do you find? According to the internet, your mild headache is either dehydration or the opening chapter of a dramatic medical documentary. So now you're sitting there, spiraling between "I'm fine" and "I need to write a will." The hospital says trust the professionals, but your curiosity says otherwise. It's the ultimate internal battle. Medical expertise versus late-night internet paranoia. Fact 14. Hospitals have an unspoken but very real rule about silence, except it only applies to you. You're expected to whisper, tiptoe, and behave like you're inside a library designed by monks. But the hospital itself? It sounds like a construction site sponsored by beeping machines. Monitors chirp every few seconds like they're sending Morse code to another dimension. Carts roll by with the subtlety of a shopping cart missing a wheel. Staff conversations echo in hallways at full volume, discussing lunch plans right outside your door while you're trying to process your existence. The contradiction is beautiful. You cough too loudly? Shh. But the IV pump can scream like it's auditioning for a horror movie at 3 a.m. Apparently, healing requires silence, just not from anything that actually makes noise. Fact 15. There's also the strange rule about personal belongings, where hospitals politely suggest you bring as little as possible, as if you're going on a minimalist retreat instead of a medical stay. You arrive with a bag, maybe a book, a charger, something comforting, and suddenly you're warned like you brought a suitcase full of gold bars. We're not responsible for lost items. Translation: anything you value is now part of a high-stakes hide-and-seek game. Your phone disappears under blankets, your charger vanishes behind the bed, and your socks develop independent travel plans. Meanwhile, you're stuck in bed like a museum exhibit, unable to retrieve your own stuff. It's the only place where your personal items feel less like belongings and more like fugitives on the run. Fact 16. Hospitals also enforce a strict stay-in-your-bed philosophy, which sounds reasonable until you realize humans were not designed to become furniture. You're told to rest, don't move too much, stay put. And after a while, you start feeling like a decorative object in your own life. Want to stretch your legs? Careful, thinking about walking. That requires permission, supervision, and possibly paperwork. Meanwhile, your body slowly forgets what movement even is. The irony is incredible. You came here to get better, but now you're being gently encouraged to evolve into a very still, slightly confused statue. By the time you're allowed to stand up again, it feels like learning to walk in a sequel nobody asked for. Fact 17. Let's not forget the rule about medication timing, which operates with the precision of a space launch, except your body didn't get the memo. Take this at exactly 8 o'clock, they say. Not 7:59, not 8:01, exactly 8. It doesn't matter if you're asleep, mid-bite, or questioning reality. The schedule must be respected like it's carved into stone tablets somewhere deep in the hospital basement. And if you miss it, suddenly everything shifts. The next dose moves, the entire timeline changes, and you feel like you've disrupted a delicate cosmic balance. It's the only place where swallowing a pill becomes a time-sensitive mission, and you're just hoping you don't accidentally break the universe by being 2 minutes late. Fact 18. Hospitals have a rule about asking questions that sound supportive. Feel free to ask anything, until you actually do. You raise your hand, curious, slightly concerned, maybe just trying to understand what's happening to your own body. And suddenly, you're met with answers so fast, so technical, and so filled with medical vocabulary that you feel like you accidentally enrolled in a graduate-level course. You nod, pretending to understand, while your brain quietly exits the building. The rule exists, but the experience turns into a performance where you play the role of person who definitely gets it. It's less about clarity and more about surviving the conversation without admitting you're completely lost. Fact 19. And then there's the rule about appropriate attire for leaving your room, which somehow turns a short walk into a full production. You can't just step out. No, you need proper footwear, the gown secured, sometimes an extra robe. Basically an outfit assembled under conditions of maximum inconvenience. You're not going to a fashion show. You're trying to walk 10 steps to feel human again. But the hospital treats it like you're preparing for a public appearance. Meanwhile, you're juggling IV poles, adjusting fabric that refuses to cooperate, and wondering how something so simple became so complicated. It's the only place where taking a short walk requires more preparation than an actual event, and somehow you still don't feel fully dressed. Fact 20. Hospitals have a very specific rule about temperature control, and somehow it satisfies absolutely no one. The room is either freezing like you've been admitted into a meat locker, or it's warm enough to make you question if you're slowly being baked. You ask to adjust it, and suddenly it's not that simple. We'll call maintenance. Maintenance. For air. Hours pass, and you're still wrapped in thin blankets that feel more symbolic than functional. Meanwhile, the thermostat is right there, staring at you like a decorative prop in a movie set. Present, but completely useless. It's the only place where controlling your own comfort feels like requesting a major renovation, and you end up layering hospital sheets like you're preparing for winter inside a building designed for healing. Fact 21. There's also the rule about hydration, which sounds straightforward until it turns into a permission-based system. You're thirsty, not dramatically thirsty, just normal human thirst. But before you can drink anything, it becomes a process. Let me check if you're allowed. Allowed to drink water, a concept so basic it feels surreal to question. You sit there, lips dry, waiting for approval like you've submitted a formal request to a committee. And when you finally get that cup of water, it's in one of those tiny plastic cups that holds exactly 3 sips if you're being generous. Suddenly, hydration feels like rationing during a survival scenario. It's the only place where water, literally the most essential thing, comes with conditions and portion control. Fact 22. Hospitals also enforce a rule about alarms that no one explains, but everyone experiences. Machines beep, constantly, loudly, aggressively. But here's the twist. You're not supposed to worry about it. Ignore it, they say casually, as if your brain hasn't evolved specifically to panic at alarming noises. The beeping could mean something urgent, something minor, or absolutely nothing, but you'll never know. So you lie there, trying to decode the rhythm like it's some kind of medical Morse code. Is that faster than before? Was that louder? Should I call someone? Meanwhile, staff walk by completely unfazed, like they've transcended human reaction. It's the only place where alarms exist, not to alert, but to test your ability to stay calm in the face of constant, unexplained chaos. Fact 23. There's a rule about bathing that sounds generous. We'll help you if you need it, until you realize it's less of an offer and more of a scheduled event. You don't just decide to shower. No, it happens at a specific time, under specific conditions, often with assistance whether you're mentally prepared or not. You're handed supplies that look like they belong in a travel kit, and suddenly your private routine becomes a coordinated operation. Timing matters, availability matters, everything matters, except your desire to just feel normal for 5 minutes. It's the only place where something as basic as getting clean turns into a carefully managed appointment, and you're just hoping you can maintain a shred of dignity in the process. Fact 24. Hospitals have an interesting rule about lights, specifically that they are never truly off. You can press the button, dim them, even request darkness, but there's always something glowing. A monitor, a hallway light slipping through the door, a blinking device that refuses to rest. It's like the building itself has insomnia and expects you to share the experience. You try to sleep, but there's always just enough light to remind you that you're not home. It's not bright enough to function, not dark enough to rest, just perfectly balanced to keep you slightly uncomfortable. It's the only place where night never fully arrives, and your body quietly forgets what real darkness feels like. Fact 25. There's also the rule about conversations happening as if you're not in the room. Doctors and nurses gather, discuss your case, use terms that sound important and slightly terrifying, and you're right there, listening like an audience member who didn't buy a ticket. They speak over you, around you, occasionally at you, but rarely with you in a way that feels complete. You catch fragments, numbers, conditions, possibilities, enough to raise questions, not enough to answer them, And when you try to jump in, the moment passes like a train you almost caught. It's the only place where your own situation can feel like a meeting you weren't invited to, even though you're the main topic. Fact 26. And then there's the rule about time itself, which somehow behaves differently inside a hospital. You look at the clock. 10 minutes have passed. It feels like an hour. You wait for something, anything, and suddenly entire chunks of the day disappear without explanation. Meals arrive at odd intervals, staff appear unpredictably, and your sense of routine slowly dissolves. There's no clear beginning or end, just a continuous loop of waiting, interruptions, and vague progress. It's like being stuck in a slow-motion version of reality where time stretches and compresses whenever it feels like it. By the end, you're not even sure what day it is. You just know you've been here long enough for time to stop making sense. Fact 27. Hospitals have a rule about movement tracking that feels like you've accidentally joined a low-budget spy program. The moment you try to get up, sensors beep, nurses appear, and suddenly your simple decision to stand becomes a monitored event. Call us before you move, they say, as if walking 10 steps requires a safety briefing. You hesitate, wondering if you're about to trigger an alarm just by existing vertically. Meanwhile, the equipment attached to you has cables long enough to trip over, but not long enough to feel free. It's the only place where standing up feels like breaking protocol, and you start negotiating with yourself like, do I really need to move, or can I just adapt to this position forever? Fact 28. There's also the rule about meal timing, which operates on a schedule completely disconnected from human hunger. Breakfast arrives when you're not hungry, lunch shows up when you just fell asleep, and dinner appears at a time that feels suspiciously early, like your body skipped ahead 3 hours. Miss it? That's it. No backup plan, no late-night option, just the memory of what could have been. Meanwhile, you're lying there later, wide awake, suddenly starving, thinking about food like it's a lost opportunity. It's the only place where your appetite has to synchronize with a system that clearly doesn't care if you're ready, and hunger becomes less about need and more about timing. Fact 29. Hospitals enforce a rule about identification checks that borders on existential. Every single time someone walks in, they ask your name, your date of birth, sometimes even what feels like your life story. At first, it makes sense. Safety, accuracy, all important. But after the 10th time in one day, you start to question reality. Who am I? Becomes less of a philosophical question and more of a daily routine. You answer automatically, like a rehearsed line in a play you didn't audition for. And if you hesitate for even a second, there's a moment of suspicion, like you might be an imposter in your own hospital bed. It's the only place where proving your identity becomes a full-time job. Fact 30. There's a rule about hallway navigation that turns a simple walk into a strategic mission. You step out, thinking you'll just stretch your legs, and suddenly you're navigating carts, staff, equipment, and people moving with purpose you don't understand. Everyone else seems to know exactly where they're going, and you're just there, slowly walking like you're in a different dimension. Then someone asks, "Can I help you?" And you realize you've wandered too far without a clear objective. It's not just a hallway, it's a system, and you're not fully part of it. It's the only place where walking without a destination feels suspicious, like you're breaking an unspoken rule of movement with intent. Fact 31. Hospitals also have a rule about communication timing that ensures important information arrives at the least convenient moment. You've been waiting all day for updates, asking questions, trying to understand what's going on. Nothing. Silence. Then, just as you finally drift into sleep or step away for 5 minutes, that's when everything happens. The doctor comes, explanations are given, decisions are made, and you missed it. Now you're piecing together information secondhand, like reconstructing a story from fragments. It's the only place where clarity feels just out of reach, and timing plays a bigger role than logic in whether you actually understand your own situation. Fact 32. And then there's the rule about discharge instructions, which arrive at the exact moment your brain is least capable of processing them. You're finally leaving, relieved, tired, slightly overwhelmed, and someone hands you a stack of papers filled with instructions, warnings, schedules, and follow-ups. They explain it quickly, efficiently, like they've done it 1,000 times. You nod, pretending to absorb it all. but your mind is already halfway out the door. Later, at home, you look at the papers and realize it reads like a complex manual for a device you don't fully understand. It's the only place where the moment you're supposed to feel free is also the moment you're handed the most information and expected to remember all of it. Fact 33. Hospitals have a rule about curtains that makes privacy feel like a suggestion rather than a guarantee. You pull that thin curtain around your bed, expecting a moment of isolation, maybe a break from the constant activity, and instantly realize it's basically a fabric illusion. Conversations bleed through like the walls don't exist, footsteps pass inches away, and every cough, whisper, or awkward medical discussion becomes a shared experience with strangers you've never met. You can hear their stories, their worries, their midnight thoughts, and they can hear yours. It's like living inside a reality show where nobody signed a consent form. The curtain stands there confidently, pretending to separate worlds while doing absolutely nothing. It's the only place where privacy is technically provided, but emotionally non-existent. Fact 34. There's also the rule about short visits from doctors, which somehow manage to be both incredibly brief and deeply overwhelming. They walk in with purpose, deliver information at the speed of a breaking news report, and leave before your brain has processed the first sentence. You're left sitting there, replaying the conversation like a confusing voicemail. Did they say it's serious? Not serious? Follow-up needed? You start analyzing tone, facial expressions, word choices, like you're decoding a secret message. And just when you think you've figured it out, doubt creeps back in. It's the only place where a 30-second conversation can determine your entire emotional state for the next 12 hours, and you weren't even sure what was actually said. Fact 35. Hospitals enforce a rule about calling staff by pressing buttons or waiting patiently, but never just calling out, which sounds reasonable until you actually need something urgently, but not urgently enough to trigger a full emergency. You're stuck in this strange middle zone where shouting feels wrong, pressing the button feels dramatic, and waiting feels endless. So you compromise. A soft hello into the void. Nothing. Slightly louder? Still nothing. Eventually, you either commit to the button or accept your fate as a silent observer of your own discomfort. It's the only place where asking for help becomes a social dilemma, and you spend more time deciding how to ask than actually getting what you need. Fact 36. There's a rule about observation that turns every moment into a subtle performance. Nurses check on you, doctors observe you, staff monitor your condition, and suddenly, you're aware of yourself in a way that feels almost theatrical. How are you sitting? Are you breathing normally? Did that movement look weird? You start adjusting behavior, not because you need to, but because you feel watched. Even something simple like eating or adjusting your pillow becomes a conscious act. It's like being in a quiet documentary where you are both the subject and the audience. The irony is that this observation is meant to help you, but it also turns your most basic human moments into something oddly self-aware and slightly uncomfortable. Fact 37. Hospitals also have a rule about expectations versus reality, especially when it comes to timing promises. Someone will be with you shortly. Shortly. A word so flexible it could mean 5 minutes or 50. You hear it once, you accept it. Twice, you start to question it. By the third time, shortly becomes a philosophical concept rather than a measurable unit of time. You begin to reinterpret reality around it. Maybe shortly is symbolic. Maybe it's aspirational. Meanwhile, you're still waiting, watching the door like it's about to reveal something important. It's the only place where time-related language loses all concrete meaning, and you're left redefining patience on the fly. Fact 38. There's a rule about equipment placement that somehow guarantees everything you need is just slightly out of reach. The remote? Inches too far. The water? Positioned in a way that requires effort you've been specifically told to avoid. The call button? Hidden in the folds of a blanket like it's playing hide and seek. It's not dramatic enough to complain about, but just inconvenient enough to drive you quietly insane. You stare at the object, calculating whether it's worth the effort, whether you'll regret moving, whether this is how it all ends, with you defeated by a cup of water. It's the only place where distance is measured not in steps, but in how much effort you're allowed to use. Fact 39. Hospitals have a rule about updates that creates a strange emotional roller coaster. You wait, hoping for news, expecting clarity. And when it finally comes, it's either incredibly vague or surprisingly casual. We'll keep an eye on it. That's it? That's the update? Now your brain fills in the blanks with every possible scenario. Good? Bad? Neutral? You don't know. And because you don't know, your imagination steps in like an uninvited expert. Suddenly, you're analyzing tone again, searching for hidden meaning in ordinary words. It's the only place where a simple sentence can create more questions than answers, and uncertainty becomes the main thing you're managing. Fact 40. And then there's the rule about leaving, physically leaving the room for even a moment. You'd think stepping out for fresh air or a quick walk would be encouraged. But no, it becomes a process. Where are you going? How long will you be? Do you need assistance? Suddenly, your simple desire to exist outside four walls turns into a mini interrogation. You hesitate, second guess, maybe even cancel the idea altogether because it feels like too much effort to explain. It's the only place where stepping outside feels less like freedom and more like requesting permission from an invisible system. And in that moment, you realize you're not just recovering, you're navigating rules that somehow follow you everywhere. Fact 41. Hospitals have a rule about documentation that turns every tiny detail into something that must be recorded like it's part of a historical archive. You mention a slight discomfort, written down. You cough twice, documented. You blink suspiciously, probably logged somewhere in a system you'll never see. It's comforting at first, knowing everything is tracked, but then it becomes surreal. You start realizing that your entire existence in that room is being translated into notes, charts, and codes. Somewhere, someone might be typing, "Patient appears slightly annoyed," and that becomes part of your official story. It's the only place where your day isn't just lived, it's archived in real time, like you're a living document being constantly updated without ever seeing the final draft. Fact 42. There's also the rule about consistency between staff, which, ironically, doesn't always exist. One nurse tells you something is fine, another says to avoid it completely, and suddenly you're caught in a polite contradiction loop. You nod to both, trying to respect authority while quietly wondering which version of reality you're supposed to follow. Ask again, and you risk sounding difficult. Don't ask, and you're left guessing. It's like receiving instructions from multiple versions of the same manual, each slightly different. The system works, but from the inside, it feels like you're navigating overlapping opinions with no clear final answer. It's the only place where certainty feels fragmented, and you become the one responsible for making sense of it all. Fact 43. Hospitals have a rule about alarms being handled by staff, which sounds reassuring until one goes off right next to you and nobody reacts immediately. The noise builds, repeats, echoes, and you're sitting there wondering if you should do something, anything, or just trust the process. Seconds feel longer when something is beeping insistently beside you. You glance toward the door, expecting urgency, but instead, there's calm. Controlled, practiced calm. Eventually, someone comes, fixes it, moves on like nothing happened. Meanwhile, you've just experienced a mini internal crisis. It's the only place where urgency and calm coexist in a way that makes you question your own instincts about what actually matters. Fact 44. There's a rule about instructions being simple, but somehow they always arrive layered with complexity. Just take this, avoid that, monitor this, call if that happens, but not if this happens unless it feels like that. You listen carefully, trying to follow every condition, every exception, every scenario. By the end, it feels less like instructions and more like a decision tree you weren't trained to navigate. You nod anyway, because asking for clarification risks opening another layer of explanation. Later, you replay it all in your head, hoping it sticks. It's the only place where simple instructions feel like solving a puzzle, and you're expected to get it right without ever seeing the full picture. Fact 45. Hospitals enforce a rule about patients that slowly transforms into a test of mental endurance. You wait for results, for staff, for updates, for the next step, and during that waiting, your mind doesn't stay still. It wanders, builds scenarios, replays conversations, imagines outcomes. The longer you wait, the more creative your thoughts become, filling silence with possibilities you never asked for. There's no timer, no clear endpoint, just the expectation that you'll remain calm and composed while time stretches. It's the only place where waiting isn't just a pause, it's an active experience that demands emotional control, whether you're ready for it or not. Fact 46. There's also the rule about optimism. Subtle, unspoken, but always present. You're encouraged to stay positive, to think ahead, to believe everything is moving in the right direction. And while that's helpful, it can also feel like a quiet pressure. You don't want to seem negative, don't want to question too much, don't want to break the tone. So you balance your real thoughts with what feels appropriate to express. You smile, agree, stay hopeful, even when uncertainty lingers just beneath the surface. It's the only place where optimism becomes part of the environment, something you're expected to participate in even when you're still figuring out how you actually feel. Fact 47. Hospitals have a rule about endings that rarely feel like clear conclusions. You're told you're improving, things look better, you're ready to move forward, but there's always a follow-up, a just in case, a keep monitoring. It's not a full stop. It's more like a comma. You leave, but part of the experience follows you home in instructions, appointments, and lingering questions. Closure feels partial, like finishing a chapter that hints at more pages ahead. It's the only place where the end of your stay doesn't feel like the end of the story. It feels like a transition into something still unfolding. Fact 48. And finally, the most absurd rule of all, everything is designed to help you feel better. Yet somehow, nothing feels normal while it's happening. You're surrounded by expertise, technology, care, and still, every small action becomes unfamiliar. Sleeping, eating, moving, thinking, it all feels slightly off, like reality has been adjusted just enough to keep you aware of it. The system works, people recover, lives are saved, but the experience itself feels like stepping into a version of the world where logic is slightly rearranged. And maybe that's the point, because the moment you leave, normal life feels extraordinary again. It's the only place where discomfort highlights what comfort actually means. Which rule felt the most ridiculous? Or did hospitals secretly train us for patience endurance? Let me know below.
Like it fast, don't let it end hard. Hit subscribe, think ends.